Over the last 40 years, I would definitely say that two of the genres which have been the most influential and made the most impact are definitely rap and heavy metal. These two genres have formed so many subgenres, which have then gone on to form more subgenres. These genres are the ones which have the huge festivals, have massive followings, and all become so innovative and creative, which I really admire in music. And my personal favorite out of all of that, I would say, is probably metalcore. Now, some metalcore can be a bit samey. It can rely on the same formula of 001, 001, 01. But there are so many talented bands out there who have been huge for this genre of music, have been huge for heavy music and rock music and metal music in general. They've enjoyed time in the spotlight, in the mainstream charts. They have huge followings of fans from all kinds of backgrounds. We're not just talking metal kids and scene kids and hardcore kids. We're talking a mainstream, vast audience. And I thought it would be fun today to make a list of the top 10 best metalcore albums of all time. And I'm not just basing this on chart performance. I am also basing it on innovativeness, how inspirational these albums were to other people, and also these albums are the ones which really propelled the band into stardom. They took them from a regular touring band to a whoa, huge band, cover of magazine, headline festival style band. So let's get into this, but first of all, of course, please guys, do hit the subscribe button. It is the most helpful thing you can do for the channel, and drop a comment down below letting me know any other genres you want me to cover. Top 10 pop punk albums, top 10 gangster rap albums. It doesn't matter what it is. I love a wide variety of music, guys, and I love making these videos for you. Album number 1, As Daylight Dies by Killswitch Engage. Now, I do not have to go into this band too much. We all know that they are one of the OG metalcore bands. They were one of the first bands doing it, and I'm sure without them doing it, this combination of melodic riffs with hardcore breakdowns, beautifully sung clean vocals along with screamy, shouty, growly verses, and incredibly talented musicians. Without this, I don't think we would have half the metalcore bands that we have today. And as much as I wanted to choose Alive or Just Breathing as the number 1 album on this list, because it is one of my favorites by them, and The End of Heartache as well, an incredibly fantastic album, As Daylight Dies had to be the album on this, because this is the one which really put them in the mainstream, got them television coverage from festivals, had them on video games, let them have music videos which were getting so much circulation, which were getting so many hits. They really blew up on social media around this time as well, especially with the song My Curse and The Arms of Sorrow. Their cover of Holy Diver was also on this album. And whilst I love The End of Heartache, and you could probably argue that this or My Last Serenade were the two songs which really kind of took off their career, I think As Daylight Dies, the album as a whole, was what really put them in the limelight. Next album, Sempiternal by Bring Me the Horizon. Now, me personally, I prefer the There Is a Hell album. This is my favorite Bring Me the Horizon album. I wasn't too fond of their earlier work. I did see them way back in 2006, and that was just incredible to see these guys who are young adults / teenagers absolutely ripping it up on stage. But it wasn't until about 10 years after their formation, when they released Sempiternal, that just went boom. Not only was Shadow Moses a huge hit, but Sleepwalking, Can You Feel My Heart, these were metalcore but infused with a real radio rock sound. I think Jordan Fish's contribution to this album really shone through, the addition of so many keyboards, but also the heavy breakdowns, Ollie's unique vocals. He has a very unique screaming style. I forget the technical term for this, when a clean vocal sounds like a scream, but it's become very popular in recent years. Other bands such as the Amity Affliction have all been using it as well. Ollie was never a clean vocalist before. They never had clean vocals in their music. They weren't a clean vocal band, unlike other bands such as Of Mice and Men, Attack Attack, Icy Stars, and Memphis May Fire. Bring Me the Horizon weren't really a clean vocal band. They were a deathcore band. Before this, the There Is a Hell album, that song was getting released more on radio stations such as Kerrang, you know, your alternative rock radio station. But I remember Shadow Moses was getting played at 8 a.m. on BBC radio. We're talking like the radio which everyone in the whole country is listening to. But that was very, very impactful, and it made them a main stage festival band. Since then, That's the Spirit, a great album as well. Again, that made them even more successful. But that was just a straight up rock album that didn't have any metalcore in it whatsoever. And when I heard Follow You, I was like, wow, this sounds like just a regular indie rock song. And then when the song finished, they said, oh, it's Bring Me the Horizon, new song by Bring Me the Horizon. I was like, oh, wow, I would have never have thought. And that's why That's the Spirit obviously didn't make the list. Even though it is technically a more successful album, it's a more mainstream album, it just hasn't really done much for the metalcore genre. Number 3, now I'm gonna get hate from this, so skip ahead and get back to the quote real metalcore if you want to, but I'm gonna put number 3 as Someday Came Suddenly by Attack Attack. Really actually enjoy their music. This album was the first of its kind. There were other bands such as Sky Eats Airplane, Enter Shikari, The Devil Wears Prada, etc. before this album, putting synthesizers in their music. But Attack Attack were the first to be really mixing EDM music with metalcore, and then so many bands went and tried to copy it afterwards, of course, as you would. This was 2008. Enter Shikari were already huge in the UK, not so much in America, and Attack Attack were basically the American and Shikari, bringing this music to the masses. This album I found had really creative guitar riffs. The combination of Austin and Johnny's vocals were fantastic, and whilst I actually love their second album, Attack Attack, and I think it's probably overall a better album, or at least I think I prefer it a little bit, I don't think that it lived up to their first album in the sense of the wider audience. And this was made a little bit clear when, years into their career, their set list was still made up of a buttload of songs from Someday Came Suddenly, because this is what the crowd really, really wanted to hear. Album number 4, Ascendancy by Trivium. Come on guys, pull harder on the strings of your martyr, dying in your arms. I don't have a lot to say about this album because Trivium have kind of a similar timeline to Bullet for My Valentine, Avenged Sevenfold, just coming onto the scene a little bit later than Killswitch Engage, but they were definitely one of the biggest metal bands, scene bands back in 2005, and whilst Ember to Inferno is a fantastic album, this definitely was the one which broke Trivium. They were massive after this. When Matt was only like 18 years old, they were doing the cover of the magazines, playing the main stages at festivals like Rock im Ring and Download Festival. They were absolutely crushing it. They were everywhere. And they're still doing amazingly. Matt does fantastically streaming their concerts on things like Twitch. They have a huge following. The albums they've released since then have been absolutely incredible. But 2005 to 2007 was like metalcore heaven. If you were a teenager during this time, which I was, metalcore was everywhere. Come on. And Trivium, even though they were a very young band, they had just broken through so much with this album because it was such a banger. The Crusade, again, the album right after it in 2006, was good, but it just didn't have the same impact. Album number 5, Ira Parkway Drive. Parkway Drive were big in like the MySpace days. They were big in the metalcore boom of 2005 to 2010. They were still absolutely crushing it through the 2010s, but it wasn't until this album, and particularly I think the song Vice Grip, that one went very, very viral. And I think this was really the song which made way for them to be such a huge festival band, the headline at massive festivals like Wacken. Like, can you get any bigger or better than that in the metal genre? I don't think so. There have been other songs since then, such as Prey, which have done extremely well for them, a massive act within the music and metal scene. And like I said, I've known about Parkway Drive since I was about 14 years old. They first came onto my radar, I think, pretty much when I first had MySpace, like in 2005, 2006. They just went and went and went. They worked so hard, and this album was just what blew them up finally, and it was so So well deserved. Next one, back in with the nostalgia album, Avenged Sevenfold, City of Evil. Now, a lot of people are going to argue that Waking the Fallen was a better album. I think it's good. It's got a slightly different, more metalcore and more heavy metal sound to it. City of Evil, it's actually more of a heavy metal and hard rock album. And by the time it got to 2007's self-titled Avenged Sevenfold album, that again was more of a rock album with metal and metalcore and guitar riffs within it. But again, 2005 to 2007, the massive bands were Trivium, Avenged Sevenfold, Killswitch, Engage, and Coheed and Cambria. Burn It Down, Backcountry, Beast in the Harlot, Seize the Day. These were huge hits, and for such a young band, I guess they'd only been around a few years by this point, it was such an achievement already, and that was a real testament to how good the music was. Okay, we're getting into the last albums now, and they're gonna start being a bit less nostalgic, because let's face it, the Warped Tour scene, the more modern metalcore bands, they're what's really carrying the weight of the genre to this day. Bands like Miss May I, Memphis Mayfire, Of Mice and Men, they're what's really carrying the genre. And that's why the next album on this list will be Restoring Force by Of Mice and Men. Because there have been other bands who have come close to being as big as Of Mice and Men, but Restoring Force had Of Mice and Men playing Brixton Academy and touring with Linkin Park, playing these ginormous arenas. They were playing the main stage at festivals and everyone was singing along, and Restoring Force was definitely the album which put them there. You know what? I really wanted to put The Flood on this list because it's one of my favorite albums of all time. OG Loco, I think, has my favorite breakdown of all time, but it just didn't make them big enough to justify putting them on this list. Restoring Force was the album which, again, had them on mainstream radio, had them on mainstream TV, had them touring with Linkin Park. Restoring Force was a bit more rocky. It definitely wasn't a straight-up metalcore album, but it did so much for the genre, and I'm sure so many people came to listening to metal and metalcore because of first hearing this album. Album number 9, The Poison by Bullet for My Valentine. This was again a difficult one to put onto the list because when Bullet for My Valentine first came out, they weren't actually taken that seriously. The true metal fans didn't really like them. And you know what? Even like scene kids didn't like them. Do you know what Bullet for My Valentine's audience was made up of at the time? It was more those little mall emos and little goth kids. They were the ones who liked Bullet for My Valentine. But that didn't prevent them from becoming a force to be reckoned with. They're obviously incredible musicians. They wrote amazing songs. They were getting so much circulation and so much attention. I obviously can't speak for what it was like in America, but certainly in England, they were just absolutely blowing up. And considering this was their debut studio album, that is quite an achievement. Hand of Blood, 4 Words, Tears Don't Fall, Her Voice Resides, all of these did really well on social media, on the festival circuit, on music media channels. And again, I think this was certainly a band that brought people to the genre that wouldn't have otherwise come to it. Album number 10. Now, this one again was a funny choice because there were so many runners-up for this list. We could have had All Our Gods Have Abandoned Us by Architects. We could have had an album by Shadows Fall. We could have had Define the Great Line by Under Oath. And this is probably my personal biases talking, but I am gonna go ahead and give it to Digital Renegade by Icy Stars. It almost became New Demons because again, this was a huge banger of an album, but Digital Renegade was the one which made them such a big band at the time. They've kind of fallen off since, but there was a time when Icy Stars were about just as big as Mice and Men. They were a bit bigger than Miss May I, and bigger than all of the other Warped Tour sort of scene kid metalcore bands. And Digital Renegade was the album that did that. Their first 2 albums were fantastic, and I love them, and they were really good albums, but they were struggling to find their sound. They were a mix of like pop punk with some electronica music thrown in, with a bit of easycore and a bit of metalcore. And within their second album, The End of the World Party, they had a couple of heavy songs, but the most of it was actually pretty much a straight up pop punk album. But Digital Renegade was when they returned to the metalcore roots, which they really were a part of, because when 3D came out, they were basically another Attack is what I expected them to be, but they went a bit more pop punk. But then Digital Renegade, they came back to it, and it was huge. Everyone loved it. People much preferred that album. These days, I'm pretty sure when they play live, they don't play any songs from the first two albums anymore. Maybe one or two, if lucky, but Digital Renegade and New Demons were the two albums which just went absolutely massive for them and turned them into a huge career touring band. Awesome, guys. Well, I hope you really enjoyed this video. I had a lot of fun throwing it together. If you could one more time hit the subscribe button, that would be absolutely legendary. It means so much. Thank you so much, guys, and I will see you soon.